And listen, I agree with Mehdi. This was supposed to have been a war that Israel, with its massively superior military, could have ended quite quickly. My question for you, John, you're a military expert, is when you look at the way that Israel went after Hezbollah with that extraordinary pager attack that was unleashed on 3,000 members of Hezbollah.
The vanguard will be there, sir.
I mean, I don't know how I can respond. So much gaslighting from the very beginning. John has been on the ground in Gaza. Yeah, as an embed. I love it when John and Douglas Murray and these people say, oh, we've been on the ground in Gaza. Yeah, as guests of the Israeli military that's doing the killing, starving, and maiming. And you've come back and done exactly what they wanted to do. You've done their propaganda for them. Journalists have not been allowed freely into Gaza. That's why every major media organization on planet Earth has said to the Israeli government, you must allow journalists in. The Palestinian journalists who are there have been killed in record numbers. Of course, Piers, you're right. They want to hide what they're doing. That's why they're killing the journalists there and blocking the journalists from coming in. This idea that he's been on the ground. Yeah, I did interview a doctor, a British plastic surgeon, Dr. Tom Patoka. And by the way, he wasn't in the European hospital because the hospital got bombed by Israel. So he was in another hospital, and he talked to me about how he has to treat patients who have maggots in their wounds. He has to treat patients without limbs. He has to treat children. I've interviewed multiple doctors on the ground in Gaza, actually in Gaza, not hanging around with Israeli military. And they've all said the same thing. American doctors, British doctors, Canadian doctors. They've all talked about how many kids they saw with sniper bullets to the head and chest. Israel does intentionally kill civilians. That's why Benjamin Netanyahu and Yoav Gallant were indicted at the International Criminal Court for precisely those charges, for willful killing of Palestinians, for murder and persecution. That's why they've been indicted. That's why every human rights group in the world says war crimes are being committed. They've killed people holding white flags. We've seen it with our own eyes. They've bombed buildings without warning with families inside, like the Al Dos family that I often cite in October 2023. They've dropped 2,000-pound bombs on refugee camps full of hundreds of people. They have killed 7 aid workers in a clearly marked World Central Kitchen aid convoy. They've bombed World Food Program convoys, leading to Cindy McCain, the wife of the most pro-Israeli senator of my lifetime, to come out and condemn Israel for attacking aid workers. John wants you to ignore Cindy McCain and British and American doctors and human rights groups and your own lying eyes watching people with white flags being gunned down. He wants you to believe him and his Israeli military minders.
Okay.
Boom. That is how you show up a propagandist. Right there, a masterclass. That is what made Mehdi, and he's the best in the business at doing that kind of thing.
Oh yeah, that was incredible. I mean, I don't even know how the fuck this asshole's gonna respond to what Mehdi just said. How do you push back on that?
Let's watch.
Mehdi, before we go back to John to respond to that, the question that he raised, and I think I've asked you this before, but I'm still curious about, given the way this has all played out, how should, and I saw Bassem Youssef being asked this on Trigonometry last week, I think it was, and he struggled to answer. How should Israel have responded to a terrorist attack, which, just to remind viewers, over 1,200 people were murdered, nearly 7,000 more were wounded, over 250 people, including babies and Holocaust survivors, were kidnapped and taken hostage, and many of those have died. How should Israel have responded to the biggest attack on its people and its land since its existence?
So there's no easy answer to that question, Piers, and you might not like the answer I give you, which is that Israel should have responded by abiding by international law, by sticking with the rules of armed conflict, by targeting only the people they believe carried out the crime. They should have used an international coalition of countries that was fully behind them. The majority of the world was behind Israel after the tragedy of October the 7th. And by the way, I have a longer memory than maybe some people in this country. After 9/11, I got asked the same question. Well, what should we do if we don't bomb Afghanistan? What should we do if we don't go after bin Laden, etc.? How did that work out? 23 years later, your pal Donald Trump here is taking pictures with the former leader of Al-Qaeda, who's still on a globally designated terrorist wanted list, right? That's where we came. The war on terror was a complete failure. And some of us who saw that, and by the way, Joe Biden even said this in one of his more coherent moments. He said Israel should learn from our lessons. Israel did not learn from the US lessons. And actually, even if you forget about all the innocent Palestinians they killed, even if you don't give a shit about the people of Gaza, even if you only care about the people of Israel, Israel's not any safer today. Israel is not winning this war. John said on Times Radio a year ago, I went back and checked, March of last year, John said, we're very close to winning. Israel's close to victory. Over a year later, they're not close to victory. They're just starving children and denying baby formula. And the former Israeli general who ran the Gaza division said a few months ago, Hamas is winning this war. So they've not made themselves any more secure. I don't have some perfect solution for what they should have done October 7th, but I do think they shouldn't have killed 50 to 100,000 people, and they should have made themselves less secure. And by the way, the prime minister should have resigned because he's the one who let it happen on his watch.
Well, I certainly agree with that, and I do think there'll be a day of reckoning for Netanyahu. The problem is, John, that Netanyahu is facing corruption charges in a trial, which may well lead to his imprisonment if he's convicted. So there's no motivation for him to bring this to an end anytime soon. And listen, I agree with Mehdi. This was supposed to have been a war that Israel, with its massively superior military, could have ended quite quickly. My question for you, John, you're a military expert, is when you look at the way that Israel went after Hezbollah with that extraordinary pager attack that was unleashed on 3,000 members of Hezbollah. You think if you've got the
Look at that shit-eating grin on this ambassador's face.
Fuck this
capability to
loser.
do that,
He's
through
a
Mossad and
military expert. We're about to hear. It's all going to make sense, guys. Thank God this guy's here to enlighten us, because Piers, Mehdi, they're both stumped. Why would Israel do this? Thank God we're going to have this dude here to inform us all.
other agencies. There were only 25,000 Hamas terrorists, we believe, at the start of this war. Why could they not have deployed similar sophisticated technology in a way that did not involve the mass slaughter of so many civilians in a place where the population is 50% under 18?
Sure. I mean, not to say that experts are a good thing, but Mehdi has said he doesn't know much about military affairs, but he does talk about it a lot. So in your question, it's pretty easy to answer, is that it's a clear sign that Israel did disengage from Gaza. And the human intelligence that was required to pull off a historic pager operation against Hezbollah couldn't be replicated because Israel didn't have that level of intelligence in Gaza, because it had disengaged and allowed Hamas to build this, what is a military challenge no military has faced in the history of really any war. And the fact that Hezbollah did let the civilians get out of southern Lebanon as the war began against them is a telling marker of why people can't understand what's going on in Gaza. Now, you didn't ask me the question of what Israel should have done, because I actually teach urban warfare at this scale. I've actually studied the history of urban warfare from Stalingrad to Fallujah, Mosul, Mawar, you name it. And when I said those statements on time radio, if the world would have allowed Israel to continue, 5 divisions going heavy against Hamas, moving civilians out of harm's way, we'd be in a different place. And this hypocrisy of the numbers, right? So there's 3 types of lies, damn lies, and statistics. There's been 85,000 children under the age of 5 who have died from starvation in Yemen since the Yemen civil war.
That's bad, asshole. That's not justification for shit. Guess what? Ro Khanna and Rand Paul had bipartisan legislation that passed the House and the Senate, and it went to Donald Trump's desk, and he vetoed that shit to feed those starving kids, you fucking animal.
I don't see protests, and I don't see daily coverage on what's going on in Yemen, where there's 2 million people actually starving. So I actually know what is possible to achieve the goals that Israel said, and I've interviewed Prime Minister Netanyahu myself. The goals haven't changed, and they are achievable. And if you don't achieve them, you're only going to continue the cycle of violence. And had the world not stopped Israel back when they said, don't go to Rafah, you can't use big bombs against people in tunnels. This is crazy on what we're setting a standard for. This Israeli standard for war, if it continues, any nation trying to defend itself after being an attempted actual genocide against its people won't be able.
What? This is what's crazy. This is what's crazy in you guys. Every accusation is a confession. It's all projection, okay? It was a terrorist attack. Okay, that's not a genocide. Nobody calls 9/11 a fucking genocide. What is a genocide? Is when you ethnically cleanse an area of a people. When you systematically and brutally murder people of a specific lineage, explicitly and purposefully, okay, and eradicate them from the land. Oh, that's what's happening. That was not what happened on October 7th. That is what has happened in the aftermath of October 2nd or 7th to the Palestinian people.
Able to. So I'm saying that Israel has done more to protect civilians in war, even when Hamas, who uses human sacrifice, is trying to get civilians killed. And they say this isn't John Spencer's word. Israel's done more to protect civilians than any other military in
Again, just deranged propaganda.
any comparable situation against something that nobody has seen as this evil of Hamas.
But if you're right, John, if you're right, why are so many of Israel's allies now turning on Israel? Why is the UK calling it morally unjustifiable? Why is the UK, France, and Canada combined to say they strongly oppose the expansion of Israel's
They're all anti-Semitic.
military operations in Gaza? The level of human suffering is intolerable. They call for the release of the remaining hostages. Of course, they should be released, but they say this escalation by Israel is wholly disproportionate. Donald Trump didn't even visit Netanyahu when he went to the Middle East for the week, right? All these things are adding up to me to a collective view by Israel's allies that they are losing the support of the people they should normally most rely on. So, you're very confident everything they're doing is completely justified, but their own main allies are not.
Well, I think each ally should ask their own militaries and their experts within their country, like the UK. Why don't you ask Sir Andrew Roberts what the UK military would have done had that happened on UK soil? Because I can tell you what the United States would have done, and they would have also answered with overwhelming. You keep using disproportionate. Actually, that's not right. Proportionality against the value of the military target. And I view my survival of my country very proportional. And what we would have done in the United
What he's saying is that he thinks Palestinian lives are worth less than Israeli lives. That's what he just said. That's what he just said, guys. Believe these people when they tell you who they are. He just said the value of one Israeli or one American life is worth more to him than one Palestinian life. Now, we know that that's obviously the case. That is why they've been able to engage in such barbaristic acts of cruelty, right? But there's no justification for it. They are ethno-nationalist, white or Jewish supremacists, depending on the nation state, right? See, because there's all of these evangelicals in America who are like white evangelical supremacists, but they have a, agreement with all of the Jewish supremacist folks in the Israeli government, right? And they kind of collaborate and scratch each other's backs here in America. Also, there's the exchange of hundreds of millions of dollars from the organization AIPAC. But I digress. Gavin, we can keep playing.
United States had an evil organization crossed our border, killed, raped, beheaded, taken hostages, we would have responded immediately with overwhelming force to ensure not one rocket came out of enemy territory until you made the enemy recognize that they aren't going to win and that they're going to lose. That's how you win a war.
Well,
quickly.
hang on. Before I go to Mehdi,
I
go to Mehdi for response. I mean, Mehdi articulated earlier the problem with that theory.
And by the way,
after 9/11, which was the worst attack.
It is possible, unfortunately, that if a bordering country of ours like Mexico, if they did a terrorist attack on that level, that we would respond by slaughtering, tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of civilians. I wouldn't put it past America if that was our response. We always use tragedies, terrorist attacks, whatever, as an excuse to go to war. So I'm not saying he's wrong, but that doesn't mean that it's fucking right. That doesn't mean that it's the right response, even if that is what America did. No. And as Mehdi Hasan brilliantly referenced, that low-key is kind of what happened with the war on terror, even though those countries weren't the ones that attacked us. That was the justification for us, and it didn't fucking result in anything. It did not result in a victory. It did not make anyone safer.
On American mainland, since anyone could remember, that after that, they did launch a massive bombardment of Afghanistan. And where did that get America?
Yep.
In the end, it got America to a place where it left with its tail between its legs, with a load of people being killed on live television, horrific scenes, a betrayal of many people who had helped America during that war. And you cannot point to that and say there was any great victory. And this is the problem with what's going on in Gaza now. What does victory now look like? Because it's not going to lead to the removal of Hamas as an entity. And it looks like support for Hamas has grown, not deteriorated. So I don't understand what victory looks like other than what Smotrich has been saying, which is actually what it looks like is all the Palestinians gone. The Israel go in, clear them out, and they take over the land. Well, that, I'm afraid, whether you like it or not, John, is actually one of the definitions of a genocide, the expulsion of a people based on its ethnicity. Mehdi, your response.
So, yeah, a lot's been said there. Thank you for coming back to me. First of all, let me just deal with this credentials game that I know John and his friend Douglas Murray love to play these days about military, who knows more about this or that. John runs his mouth on a variety of topics. I've seen him talk about, in fact, just today, he's talked about war crimes, international law, who's breaking international law. Last time I checked, John is not a lawyer. The International Criminal Court has indicted Netanyahu and Gallant for war crimes and crimes against humanity. The former Jewish president of the tribunals for Yugoslavia and Rwanda says Netanyahu should be indicted for war crimes and crimes against humanity. So let's just, we're going to play the expert game. John's not an expert on genocide. The actual genocide experts, the president of the International Association of Genocide Scholars says Gaza is a genocide. The leading Israeli scholars.
I'm just going to come out front and be honest with you guys. I'm not an expert in anything. None of the things we talk about on the show am I qualified to discuss. That's the Vanguard disclaimer.
Yeah, that's why he has me here. Okay, sometimes you guys are wondering, well, I'm the authority.
Scholars of the Holocaust, Omar Bartov at Brown, Amos Goldberg at Hebrew University, say Gaza is a genocide. John's not an expert on targeting terrorists. The guy who led the attack on ISIS, the American Master Sergeant Wes Bryant, has said John doesn't know what he's talking about. So let's not play this credentials game because John will lose, just like Douglas did on the Rogan show. Let's talk about substance. John said a year ago, we're close to winning. He talked about not being allowed into Rafah. Rafah has been destroyed destroyed. Have you looked at any pictures recently? It's flattened. You don't need to go there with the IDF to see that they flatten Rafah. They flatten most of Gaza, and they still have not won, quote unquote. It's absurd to say that Israel was held back. Is this the new stab in the back? This is the new bullshit defense. The former Israeli ambassador to the United States said recently, thank God Joe Biden was president while this was going on. He gave us everything we wanted. He never asked us to stop. He never asked for a ceasefire. America gave Israel everything it wanted, and they went ahead and decided to, you talk about killing Hamas commanders. They dropped two 2,000-pound bombs on October the 31st, 2023, on the Jabalia refugee camp, killing over 100 people to kill one guy, Ibrahim Biari, who wasn't even there, a Hamas commander. They killed over 100 people with two 2,000-pound bombs, which incinerate everyone within 100 square feet and damage everyone within 1,000 square feet. That is not targeted welfare. That is not proportionate. That is not legal. And we've seen that play out now over 20 months. And as you said at the start of the show, as I said, the dam is breaking. The Spanish Prime Minister said Israel is a genocidal state. The Brits, the French, the Canadians that have backed everything Israel done, Britain continues to arm Israel, are saying this is intolerable. Donald Trump, as you've said, Piers, wants this done, wants this over, isn't a fan of Netanyahu. Not that I have any trust in Trump to do any of the right thing. And I think the reality is, look, everyone can see with their own eyes, there's no justification ever for starving people. Since March the 2nd, to not allow baby formula and diapers in, only a sociopath would support that. And John's very smart, he's very eloquent, he comes on here, talks with stats, cites law. Back in Israel, the Israeli politicians and the Israeli journalists are saying openly genocidal things. They are saying everyone in Gaza is our enemy. They are saying we're going to get rid of everyone from Gaza. They are saying Gazan babies are not innocent. That's what they say on Israeli television, if anyone bothers to watch.
Yeah, and actually, John, there was a piece in the Jewish News in the UK published yesterday, which was without a doubt the most critical piece I have read by a mainstream
Yeah, and I think there was like some,
this country.
I forget what publication or whatever published it, but there was some statistic that like only 6% of the Israeli public thinks the war is going too far. That like they're concerned about like people in Gaza. So yeah, it's 100% accurate that in Israel, like they're not even using dog whistles. It's just straight up like Nazi Germany. You know what I'm saying? That's literally what the fuck it is. Only in this country to English speakers do they send dumbasses like this fucking expert out to gaslight people into thinking this is somehow tolerable and should continue. Like, it's so funny that anyone continues to think that supporting Israel is the humanitarian position. Like, at this point, if you support Israel, just be honest, like the people in Israel are. Like, I'm a Nazi. I fucking hate Palestinians. They all deserve to die. Like, that's what you believe. Own it. But don't pretend like, oh, I'm actually supporting them because that's the humanitarian thing to do. We got to defend this nation. Like, fuck off.
Yeah, go to any of the Hebrew media in Israel, which is how you know it's actual Israeli media that Israeli people are going to consume, and they are the most deranged, genocidal Zionists you've ever seen in your entire life. And in fact, at the beginning of the controversy, I used to say shit like, oh, it's a lot like America after 9/11, you know, people are crazy, but the public will come back. Like, guys, this even dwarfs, this well exceeds the hysteria and racism and barbarism of what I think we saw in America in the wake of 9/11, which is something that I was disgusted by and molded me, and I still reflect on as a, you know, stain on our society. But I mean, it's crazy, the out and out support of the abolition of the Arab people in the broader Israel. Like, that's just what they will tell you they want. Yeah. And that means ethnic cleansing and genocide.
Yeah.
Ever. And it was very critical of the Israeli government and its strategy. So I think this idea that what they're doing, the government, has widespread support now from Israelis or Jewish people globally, I think is actually beginning to be proven wrong. I think there's a lot of uprisings now of people saying enough, because they can see there's no.
I like how Piers Morgan finally like comes around to the right position, and now he's like, and many people are waking up. It's like, bitch, even you're so fucking late to this party. It's like, yeah, you are finally woken up now, but it only after like fucking the extermination is practically complete. Like, the job's basically done. Gaza's gone. Rafah's flattened, like Mehdi just pointed out. So it's like, yeah, it's nice that you've arrived at this position and you're finally ready to not only condemn Hamas, but also Israel. Little too late, though.
Yeah. I mean, no one really on the Israeli government side has explained what is going to happen when this war ends, or indeed what victory looks like. And I just don't understand it. I mean, look, you're a war expert. If you don't have a victory, what happens?
Oh, I know this one. Perpetual profits for the military industrial complex.
So you have continued war. So this is I mean, there was a lot there that Mehdi talked about. And if you have to quote a master sergeant as your expert, as you're trying to say that I'm not an expert, or the other people that you list, while you're saying I'm not an expert,
He's the guy who literally,
he's
the guy who literally led the effort to kill ISIS.
Yeah.
But okay.
Don't interrupt me. I didn't interrupt you, but you're not an expert. Fine. I'm not an expert. Fine. But history, the military.
Yeah, he's, you know, you're always complaining about how there's no slow Southern accents anymore, but there's a
Southern?
good old boy. Yeah, I think it's like a deep South accent.
Tactics. You say, Piers, what does victory look like?
Yeah.
Exactly the standards. Every hostage brought home. Hamas not in power, both military or political power in Gaza. And there's something else. Now you have actual great quote Israeli press. That's the beauty of a free press. People can say what they want and get it published. You have people voting with their feet in Gaza right now saying Hamas, we don't want Hamas. What you have, what victory looks like. Now I can tell you historically what has ever looked like and what did it take to defeat another military. Take the Korean War. 2 million civilians died in the Korean War. 54,000 civilians a month for every month of that war. Do we call that a genocide? Do we call it illegal? No. Israel
It was a literal illegal war, and so was Vietnam, you dumb motherfucker. Yeah, it's a stain on our history. It is a horrible thing that we did. It was immoral by every single metric. Like, what is the matter with you?
Also, like, and you could be like, oh, well, like, was the Vietnam War a genocide too? And it's like, I mean, as fucked up as the Vietnam War was, like, the people in charge of the fucking country were just saying we want to exterminate all of the Vietnamese population. That is literally what the people in Israel are saying, not just the public, but the military officials. You know what I mean? Like, that is their explicit fucking goal. They want the land and they want the people gone. It's not even, they don't even have a veiled fucking, pretend threat in Israel. They're just honest about it. Like Mehdi's saying, like, even the most atrocious American war crimes, again, we weren't just saying like, yep, let's go in and destroy all of Vietnam, let's kill every Vietnamese person, even though that is functionally what was fucking happening.
Right. The difference being that we didn't want to make Vietnam like the 51st state or whatever the fuck. You know what I mean? Whereas, like, obviously.
Yeah, we weren't trying to literally just kill all those people and take the land.
Yeah.
It was all about, like, communism or whatever.
Exactly. Yeah, it was killing the Viet Cong, which was fucked up and bullshit. And as you said, as a consequence, did just end up brutally murdering people at a rate that was insane. And I'll never forget when I was in Vietnam, I got really into like trying to read about it. I went to the War Remnants Museum and I, did all. It is absolutely insane the kind of shit that we were doing to people in Vietnam. So for this to be even worse than that, it really brings home like the level of systematic killing that we're watching. And when you say worse, it's like that is not meant to absolve any of the cruelty or barbarism or horror that
it's probably just as bad on the actual ground. It's just the messaging is more genocidal when it comes to the Israeli justification for their military operation versus in Vietnam. It's not like we were just telling people at home, yep, we're doing this to eradicate an entire, population, which is already endangered. That's the thing about the fucking Palestinian population compared to the Vietnamese or the Korean population. Like, they are at risk of fucking disappearing entirely. Their entire cultural lineage and homeland has been eradicated. So like, it's just a different, there's way less of them.
Yeah.
Does follow the law of war and goes way beyond the legal obligations, like feeding the enemy's population. Because as of right now, trucks are rolling in, even though they've tried to figure out a plan to get the food away from Hamas.
This is fucking horrible to say. There is a literal starvation campaign happening right now in Gaza that we've all been watching for months.
And again, point the finger at Hamas. Point the Mehdi, control yourself. Open the gates.
Oh, it would have been off. I just want everybody to know, if he'd said that to me, it would have been off the fucking rails, okay? At that point, control myself. Fuck you, asshole. How about that? How do you like them apples? You don't fucking own me.
That's why they need Jank in here. That's what he would have said.
Yeah, throw some spice in here, Pierce.
Create the biggest displaced person camp just on the other side of the gate and get the women, the children, and the elderly out of harm's way, and then destroy Hamas. That's victory, so that it never threatens Israel again. Go to Sir Andrew Roberts on the history of when you start a war, when you lose a war, you actually do lose the right to govern your population. You do lose the right to subjugate your population, because the billionaires in Qatar don't care how many people in Gaza are dying.
Okay, Mehdi, final word to you.
I mean, look, we can argue about what victory looks like. We can also argue that a victory shouldn't involve a genocide, right? That's been my consistent position from the beginning. Don't kill civilians. Don't intentionally harm civilians.
100%.
When the former head of the Israeli military, the former
Israeli
defense,
even with wars, I do think were just. Like World War II, kind of. I mean, it's kind of hard to argue that it had to be fought. I know one time you tried to like make the pacifist,
I will tell you guys that the real argument that I will make is that when people try and act like the United States were the good guys,
No,
we were
I agree
prepared
with
to
that.
work with Germany.
Well, that's
for
what I was
so
about
long.
to. That's what I was about to say. Even in a war that I agree had to be fought, like I'm not going to sit here and fucking defend the firebombing of Dresden, which resulted in mass civilian slaughter. Like, no, I actually don't think that was. I wouldn't defend the bombing of Hiroshima. You know what I'm saying? Like, and people that say that was necessary to win World War II are fucking stupid. And again, I think that was a war that, yeah, like the world did kind of have to come together to defeat the Nazis and stuff, but that doesn't mean that everything they did in order to do that was justifiable. Like, no, there should be rules. There should be fucking international law, and you shouldn't just be able to go destroy an entire city of fucking civilians in the pursuit of winning a war. Like, call me crazy, but no, if a war is gonna have to be fought, then yeah, civilians should actually be off the table for real.
100%.
Defense minister, not some lefty, not some anti-Semite. Moshe Yalon says last week, we're doing ethnic cleansing. We're sending our soldiers to commit war crimes. We're losing touch with our Jewish values. That's what Moshe Yalon, a hawk, the former head of the Israeli military, said last week. There's a reason he's saying that, and there's a reason John Spencer doesn't want to engage with that, because Israeli generals are saying it themselves. We've
I'll
turned
engage
killing
with it.
kids into a hobby. The world can see. I thought we're not interrupting, John. The world can see what Israel is doing. Israeli generals can see. And by the way, one last point, please don't go and invoke Yemen to score your point. I think I've spoken and written more about Yemen than you ever have. People like you only ever come along and cite Yemen and Sudan to defend Israel. You don't actually give a shit about the people of Yemen and Sudan. Show me how many things you've written about Yemen and Sudan versus what I've written about Yemen and Sudan.
Okay.
I actually don't give a shit about you. I care about civilians.
Wow, the way to gotcha. Yeah, I don't give a shit about you. I know you are, but mine. Oh gosh, I guess this is what you get for debating Forrest Gump on foreign
That's
policy.
so fucking cringe. This guy reminds me of like a Simpsons character or some shit. Like, you know what? He's just so fucking annoying.
Yeah. Look at Mehdi's face at the end.
Oh, control yourself, John.
Boom, gets that last line in. That's the end of the interview that I wanted to play with.
Oh god, what a loser. What a piece of shit. The quality of Israel propagandists is really waning. They're running out of basically anyone that's willing to do the job of defending the indefensible. Like, imagine that's your job, to go out there and find a way to fucking defend this. It's crazy.
And this is that tweet I referenced from Pierce where he did. That being said, do you now condemn Israel? A yes or no would suffice. I condemn the Israel government. So this is from, yeah.
Welcome to the resistance.
Only because fucking England started criticizing Israel, though. Like, this dude is just like such a
That's
loyalist.
what I'm saying. It took him so long to get.
He's a Union Jack, you know? Anyway,
Yup.
that's all I had for
Congratulations,
today.
Piers Morgan, for being finally correct. And it's funny because like he was willing to fucking condemn Hamas like the day one of this. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Oh, 1,000,000 times. Do you condemn Hamas?
Yeah.
Do you condemn Hamas? And I'm sorry, guys, I can't help it. Ad hominem attacks. I'm sorry, but doesn't he look like he kind of is like the British Walter Cronkite if that person was played by Peppa Pig? You know what I mean? Just like he has this weird like Peppa Pig neck. I can't ever unsee it. Sorry, Pierce.
That's who Peppa Pig was actually modeled after. You didn't know that?
Yeah, Piers Morgan. Anyway,
Piers Morgan. It's crazy how I feel like literally basically our entire lives, Piers Morgan has been not only around, but like pretty much all as relevant as he is now. Like he's always kind of been a fixture of at least the British media. I remember there's that iconic interview of him arguing about 9/11 with Jesse Ventura, I think on the BBC, where Jesse's talking about like Trade Center 7, and you know he's like, that's bollocks, and you know Jesse Ventura's like, look at the tape. It's crazy. And it doesn't even seem like Piers Morgan was that much younger back then. Like it feels like he was kind of just the same age always.
Look out the door if you hear an ambulance. The Vanguard will be there, sir. The Vanguard will be there, sir. The Vanguard will be there, sir. The Vanguard will be there. Be